The Final Furlong Podcast is proudly brought to you by Geoff Banks Bet. Join the excitement and sign up to Geoff Banks Online now to get 10% off any net losses returned as cash after your first month of betting up to £500 at geoffbanks.bet. With Royal Ascot almost upon us, 35 races over 5 days, we've got expert help and a man who is in red-hot form. He's one of the best betting minds in the business. He's a true international form expert, and he's been banging in winners at Cheltenham. Welcome back to the Final Furlong Podcast, Sky Sports Racing's Tim Carroll.
Thanks very much, Emmet. Good to chat to you again. And yes, it was a very good day at Cheltenham earlier this morning. We only had the 4 winners, but it was the right 4 winners.
That's what I'm talking about. We're going to do Tim's top 5 bets for Royal Ascot 2024, which I'm intrigued to hear what you're going to be going for. I know the races, but we'll find out the horses in a couple of minutes' time. There has been some talk, though, about the quality of the meeting. And look, I'm very excited about Royal Ascot. I feel very privileged to be covering it yet again this year on TalkSport 2. The international contenders aren't as big this year as they have been. The Americans, there's some coming over, but not as many. And the Australians, well, they've only sent over 2. No Hong Kong contender, no Japanese contender. Why do you think it's dropped off this year?
Well, I think you've got to remember, you've just mentioned Hong Kong, Japan, Australia, America. Now, those 4 nations have one thing in common. Well, they have several, really, but one thing that really stands out, and that's exceptional prize money. So the first thing you have to look at, is the prize money big enough to entice the horses here? The other thing I would mention for the Australian sprinters as well, without sounding all smug, but they have come over and won the big sprints. Been there, done that sort of thing. The big challenge for an Australian horse would be to come over and compete sort of over that mile and a quarter sort of range. The other thing I would say as well, if you go back 2 years ago with Nature Strip when he won, he absolutely dotted up. And I think there was a few people back home and thought, well, we know how good he is. He's really good, but hey, we've run right up in behind him in a couple of big sprints. I think we might send a few of our horses over. They come over last year, and okay, a couple of them ran well enough. Cannonball, well, it all went horribly wrong for him. And I think people sit back and go, oh, actually, it might not be that easy to send a horse over the Royal Ascot and win a big race. So I think you've got to factor those things in. As far as the American horses go, well, to be fair, we don't really see that many horses coming over from America. I know Tevin won the Queen Anne a few years ago. It's normally Wesley Warden, the 2-year-olds. Now, he has kind of lowered the numbers, so to speak. And his last winner at the meeting was 2021, which was Campanelle, who won the Commonwealth Cup in the Stewards Room. I don't think that that's such a big issue for Wesley, because no one's got a right to win a race at Royal Ascot. But it's just a fact over the last couple of years, a few of the 2-year-olds from America have bombed badly. So that probably puts them off a little bit. And Wesley has come out and said it's costing the owners a lot of money to send them over there these days. So that's a bit of a negative as well. But look, it sort of comes and goes. I've got no doubt we'll see more Australian horses coming back here at some point. But given that they've won the King's Stand or the King Charles, as it's now known, several times, and either Australian trained or ex-Australian horses have also won the Queen Elizabeth, the other big sprint on the Saturday, a few times. I think there is a little bit of a feeling that sort of been there, done that, unless you've got a 3 or even a 4-year-old colt coming over that can potentially increase their commercial value, well, it really just doesn't make a lot of sense. You've got to be doing it for the fun of it.
Yeah, and it's interesting you mentioned the Americans, because there's definitely been a move to the turf in America. Like, that was the poor relation for years. Certainly when I got into racing in the 2000s, the Americans didn't want to know anything about the turf racing, and it was almost, they just gave it up to the Europeans. Yeah, whatever, they were just having it for the fun of it. But they've obviously really changed their minds on that now, and turf racing has become much more popular. But even with that, they did send over a really high-class dirt performer in Animal Kingdom who'd been to Dubai and won out there, came to the Queen Anne, and it didn't happen at all for the horse. And maybe if a high-profile American horse like him had come over and won one of the Open Company Group 1s, that would have made the other Americans go, oh, hang on a second, we can go over to Britain and beat them in their own backyard. But when it fails, it just kind of seems like a 2-year-old niche thing for Wesley Ward as opposed to actually competing in the top Open Company Group 1s.
I think unless you've got a horse like a Secretariat or a Flightline, you're probably not going to take on the Europeans. A bit like the Australian horses, you're not going to take on the Europeans over, say, 10 furlongs. The horses that might come for that are from a nation such as Japan. As we know, Japan's the only jurisdiction in the world that's on the same sort of plane as the Europeans when it comes to middle distance. What you would like to see is a few of the American sprinters. And a horse like Tepper, it probably wasn't the strongest renewal of the Queen Anne that year, and I don't want to take anything away from her. I think we'd all agree, certainly a horse like Frankel, but even a few other winners of the Queen Anne probably would have beaten her on the day. But maybe a sprinter miler type from America is what we could entice over here, and that would be great to see. I just don't. You've only got to have a look at when the European horses go over there, and they usually, quite often, you'll get a sort of Group 3, maybe a Group 2 type from over here, and they'll go over and win Group 1s on the turf for fun over there over a middle trip.
It's a little bit like Dubai Honor going down to Australia and picking up 2 Group 1s. But...
first blow landed to Emmet.
The first jab has been put in there. Put that Australian racing in its place. Speaking of Australian racing, we're going to start with an Australian contender for the Australian man. We'll begin with third race on day one. It's the 5 furlong King Charles III Stakes Group 1. The first horse is Asifora, if I've got the pronunciation right. She's a 4-time Group 2 or Group 3 winner down under. But I covered her debut for TalkSport 2. I was presenting that day. I'll be honest, Tim, I was pretty underwhelmed by her. Oisin Murphy's on board, so obviously that strikes an interest. Does she deserve to be the price she is?
Well, look, I'm actually opposing her. She's going to be my first play. And when I say my first play, and they might never let me back into Australia again when I say this, but I'm prepared to lay a 1, 2 and 3 here. I really don't like her in this spot. But getting back to the race you were talking about, the Temple Stakes, to be fair to her, that was on a soft track. She's going to be a lot better on top of the ground. And at the moment, they're kind of saying it's going to be pretty quick ground on Tuesday. In fact, I've just read on the Racing Post where the forecast might have got it wrong and they might even water. So she'll come on for the run. She'll be better on top of the ground. Yeah, believe it or not. Well, look, if I'm wrong, blame the Racing Post. But I read that about 5 minutes before we came on air. But I've said this a million times and I'll say it again. If you have a look at the Ascot Straight, I don't know if you've walked it. I've walked it a few times. It's not only uphill, not only does it drag all the way, it goes up in steps. And a lot of these Australian horses, well, none of them have ever seen anything like that. And I've always said to win the King Charles, to win the 5 furlong race, you need a genuine 6 furlong horse from back home. For the other race, which is now known as the Queen Elizabeth, you want a horse. There's no Australian horse has ever won that race or even run well in it that hasn't won over a minimum trip of 7 furlongs back home. So you want a 6 furlong horse. Now, Henry Dwyer, the trainer himself, has come out and said, look, she's a 5.5 furlong horse back home. If the ground is on the good side on Tuesday, I think she'll run a bit of a race, but I reckon that last 100 yards going up the hill, I think her legs will be going everywhere because it's just not going to play to her strengths. The trainer has said that he's probably going to keep her on for a European campaign, where I think she'll run very well. I hope they go to the King George at Goodwood, that downhill run. Yes. That will definitely suit it. Maybe the Nunthorpe, but you tend to get some pretty good European sprinters in the Nunthorpe. And you've got to remember this filly, I think she's rated about 111 or 112, somewhere around there. I mean, she's a good filly back home, but she's not in the top few sprinters. And maybe even the Abbe, although... that would be ground dependent because, as we know, it can be a bit soft that time of the year in France. But it's no knock on the filly, and I'd be happy to be proven wrong because then I'll get the bragging rights. But I'm happy to lay a 1, 2 and 3 in the King Charles this year.
See, people remember winners, Tim. So this is going to work out very, very simply. If you're right, she bombs out. There won't be any issues. You'll be welcomed back home with open arms. They might even give you a can of Foster's. Could he be any more dismissive? But if she goes and wins, you will never be allowed back into Australia ever again.
Look, you've got to call it the way you see it. I love seeing the Australian horses win or even run well because it gives me some bragging rights. But it's as I say, it's nothing against the filly. I just think that Ascot just will not help her at all. I'd like to see her on a flat track. Ideally, I'd like to see her on a track like Goodwood, where for the first furlong, they basically run down a cliff. It's no coincidence that Hudson, who was never won a Group 1 in Australia, she was a precocious 2-year-old. She comes over here as a 5-year-old. Okay, Royal Ascot was no good for her because she fell out of the stall. So we learnt nothing that day. She then goes to the King George. She finishes runner-up, a long way in front of the others. Who does she finish runner-up to?
The GOAT.
Tash.
Yeah, the GOAT.
So, there's no shame in that. And as I said, she wasn't even a Group 1 winning filly back home. In fact, she'd won one race in the last 7 before coming over here to listed level. So you could argue this filly actually turns up with stronger overall form. But I really think she'll be far better suited to something like the King George at Goodwood, maybe the Nunthorpe at York. They'd be the two races I'd be looking at for her.
That's amazing. It gives me a lot of confidence, actually, because that's essentially what I was saying, not as eloquently as you, and I wasn't making any reference to the King George at Glorious Goodwood.
I don't think I've ever been eloquent.
But my visual impression of her at Haydock was, oh, you're a short runner. You don't even stay 5.
Yeah, and look, I think if I was having a bet in the race, and I'm not, apart from laying her, and I'm not a natural layer, no jokes now, but it's, I prefer to back horses to win. But if I was having a little bit of a play in the race, I'd look, Twilight Calls, I know he's had a couple of shots at the race in the past, but he's run well in it twice now. There's a fair bit of speed here. He'll enjoy that. He's got the services of Brian Moore, so maybe one for the each-way players. But from a betting perspective, if you're talking about finding the winner, it's not a race that overly excites me.
So it's a place lay of the Australian filly and possible excommunication from Australia and banishment from the country forevermore if she goes and wins with Oisin Murphy on board for Tim Carroll, and a potential each-way play on Twilight Calls. But that's the first of the top 5 Royal Ascot bets for Sky Sports Racing's Tim Carroll. To the St. James's Palace Stakes, which is probably the race of the entire meeting. The 2,000 guineas winner, Notable Speech, against the Irish 2,000 guineas winner and the horse he beat at Newmarket, Rosalind. Henry Longfellow, an outstanding 2-year-old last season, a 4-1 shot with Geoff Banks Bet. And the French 2,000 guineas winner, Metropolitan, who finished in front of Aidan's horse, is a 9-1 shot. Unquestionable, still in there at 50s. Of all of these potential superstars, Tim, who are you siding with in the St. James's Palace Stakes?
Yeah, this is probably my nap of the meeting. I really like the favourite. I know it's unoriginal, but Notable Speech. When you look back and watch his run, actually, he's run at Kempton leading into the Guineas. When you look at the sectionals, that was hugely impressive. But I think when you watch his win in the Guineas, the fact that he came from the back of the field, he made his move into the jaws of the contest. The taps had already gone on, but he picked them up really quickly. And then he stayed on strongly over the last little bit. And as we know, the second horse, Rosallion, then came out and won the 2,000 guineas in Ireland. He's a very good colt himself. I think this Notable Speech, I'll make a prediction now, I think come the end of the year, he's going to be in the top 2 or 3 turf horses in the world. I think he might be a tad special.
Major confidence behind Godolphin's horse. He's an 11-8 shot currently with Geoff Banks Bet. Henry Longfellow was the horse that most of us were coming down on yesterday, certainly Adam and myself, but George Gorman very much with you as well.
The other thing here is, Emmet, now you've got Hardham, who will definitely go forward, the Richard Hannon runner. I'm assuming River Tiber is going to be rerouted to the Commonwealth Cup.
He's going to the Jersey.
To the Jersey, sorry, is he? Yep. Okay, so you've only got one real pace angle here, and if you have a look at the top 4, the 3 winners of their respective guineas, and you look at Henry Longfellow, most of them you would expect them to be no closer than mid-division. Now, the one thing about this fella, I just think that he's got that sort of change of gear, that turn of foot. He can put himself in the right place at the right time very quickly. And I think if this gets a little bit tactical, that's going to help him a lot as well. Currently, I'm having a look. He's 11-8 at the moment. I'd be happy enough with that. Okay.
Notable Speech, 11-8. For the St. James's Palace Stakes. To the second race on day 2, the Queen's Vase over a mile 6. It's a race that Aidan O'Brien has won 7 times. And I think, Tim Carroll, you're of the opinion he's going to win it again. The question is, with who?
Oh, yeah, I'm going to be boring again and go with the favourite Highbury. I thought he was very impressive when he won that maiden at Leopardstown last time out. It was only his second start in the race. And I know it's a maiden. I know he's going into the frying pan here. But if you look at the way he won it, he travelled very strongly outside of the lead at leader. He picked up nicely. He looks an all-out stayer, to be fair. But he picked up nicely to win by 8 lengths. Now, if you go back and you have a look at that race, I think 6 of the 8 runners that finish behind him have subsequently come out. There's been 2 winners. And the other 4 have all been placed, have all run well. Now, keep it in mind, he gave them a thrashing. I just think I think he'll be really suited to the Hill of Ascot as well, because, like I say, I'm sure he's going to get a bit further than this in time as well, if that's the route they elect to go down. And as you mentioned, Aidan O'Brien does have a very good record on the race. He's a 7-time winner of the race. He's won 4 of the last 10 renewals. Now, the last win in the race, I think was a few years ago, was Santiago back in 2020. But he's got a wonderful record in the race. This horse has got a lot of upside. And as I said, I think he'll be very suited to the uphill drag there at Ascot.
There's also a massive amount of improvement potentially in this fella too, because like most Aidan horses, beaten first time out, but went from a 79 RPR to a 98 for that second start at Leopardstown on good ground. He's absolutely bolted up there. He looked a properly exciting horse.
He finished in behind Birdman, who reopposes here, didn't he, the first time out? That was in a maiden at Cork, if I remember correctly. Mm-hmm. But as you say, quite often Aidan leaves plenty to work with, as most of the leading trainers do these days. But you tend to find with Aidan that these, especially these type of horses, they take not a step forward, but a massive step forward second time out, and then quite often they take another big step forward for Ascot. I don't think that it's any coincidence that he's had his first run, probably left a bit to work with. Second run he wins, probably still a little bit to work with. Third run's going to be at Ascot. That's atypical sort of Aidan O'Brien method.
Well, not only is he a bet for me as well, I think the 9-4 is fair. We'll probably get it on the day. You can get it right now with Geoff Banks. But I'm not so sure that Los Angeles is the St. Ledger horse that people are thinking he is. He's going for the Irish Derby, and they might go to Doncaster with him, maybe, but I suspect Highbury is far more likely for that race, and that's what they did with Leading Light and with Kew Gardens. They went from the Queen's Vase, having won that, to going and winning the St. Ledger, and he's 12-1 for the St. Ledger with Geoff Banks Bet right now. I think that's a massive price.
Yeah, look, I've got no doubt he'll head that way to the St. Ledger. He certainly looks like a St. Ledger type anyway. As I said, he won last time out over a mile and a half second up, and he looked to stay. He didn't look, to be fair, he didn't look to have a big turn of foot, but he just picked up very nicely. Now, I don't know the strength of that race, the horses in behind, but as I say, there's a couple that have come out and subsequently won, and a few others that were, a dozen plus lengths behind them that have been placed, that have run well in races. So it's probably a good shout if you can get the right price.
Yeah, you can get 12-1 with Geoff Banks Bet right now. I do not think that's going to be a price available after Royal Ascot. This is a paid advertisement from BetterHelp Therapy Online. I want to take a moment to talk about something really important: mental health. This year has been flying by, and it's a great time to reflect on what we've accomplished and what we still want to achieve. For me, therapy has played a crucial role in my life, especially during my teenage years. Growing up with an abusive father and dealing with a traumatic childhood was incredibly tough. Therapy provided me with a safe space to work through my feelings, develop positive coping skills, and set healthy boundaries. It was invaluable to me then, and it's invaluable to me now. If you've ever thought about starting therapy, but you were put off by the prohibitive costs or the idea of pouring out your feelings in a stranger's office, I recommend giving BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, making it convenient and flexible to fit into your schedule. You just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a registered therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time at no additional charge. With over 1,000 therapists registered in the UK, BetterHelp can connect you with professionals who have a wide range of expertise in mental health. And our listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/furlong. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/furlong. Take a moment for yourself and get on your way to being your best self with BetterHelp at betterhelp.com/furlong. This episode of the Final Furlong Podcast is only possible with your support, listening and watching, and with the support of our sponsors. So give me 60 seconds to tell you about Geoff Banks Bet. Betting on horse racing used to be very simple. It was us, the punter, versus them, the bookmakers, the old enemy. But today, betting with online bookmakers is zero fun. Online betting companies promise you the world, but if you have the nerve and the audacity to place a winning bet, they will make you jump through endless hoops just to access your cash. It is not fair and it's not fun. And betting is supposed to be fun. Geoff Banks is different. He's one of the most recognizable faces in British racing. He's got pitches at racecourses all across the United Kingdom. He is a true horse racing fan. And while Geoff very much promotes responsible betting, he is standing up and fighting back against these insane affordability checks. Affordability checks that will destroy the levy and kill British racing. Sign up to geoffbanks.bet right now. Use our promo code FFP500, and not only will you get access to a bookmaker who values your custom, who is a racing fan, but he'll give you best odds guaranteed on British and Irish racing, and he'll give you 10% cash back on net losses after your first month, up to £500. Gamble responsibly, 18 plus only, begambleaware.org. It's tradition refined with modern tech and unbeatable odds. Use our promo code FFP500 and place your bets now with Geoff Banks Bet. The Final Furlong Podcast is proudly brought to you by Geoff Banks Bet. Join the excitement and sign up to Geoff Banks Online now to get 10% off any net losses returned as cash after your first month of betting up to £500 at geoffbanks.bet. To the fourth best bet of Royal Ascot for Tim Carroll, and we're moving on to the Thursday in the Norfolk Stakes over 5 furlongs. Aidan O'Brien's got Whistle Jacket. He's well clear on time form ratings, well clear on RPRs of all the juveniles. But I'm not so sure that Tim Carroll is with him.
Oh, look, I like him as a 2-year-old. I think he's rated, 109, somewhere around there. That's a pretty good rating for a juvenile at this time of the year. I think the juveniles this year so far, they've been okay. They haven't blown the hinges off the door, so to speak. My selection here is going to be Saturday Flirt. Now, I must admit, she's a little bit of a speculator. She's with Wesley Ward. Now, people can crab Wesley over the last couple of years, and that's fair enough, but the man has trained 12 winners here, and there's a lot of trainers, a lot of very good trainers over here that would be delighted to have 12 winners at the Royal meeting. I think the problem is with Wesley, as we touched at the top of the show, his last winner was Campanelle in 2021, and it's not that he hasn't had a winner since then. It's just so many have run poorly, but I suppose they can be a bit diamond, they can be a bit rock. I'm hoping this filly will be a bit diamond. She won a turf maiden, which is a good start. It was at Keeneland over 5.5 furlongs, early start of the race. That was back in April. Now, the funny thing is that Wesley kind of said that the original plan was to go forward with her, but she was tardy out of the gate, so they kind of had to ride her like a European filly. They held her up off the pace. She ran over the top of them. Really nice performance. Now, it wasn't a massive speed figure, but there was plenty to like about the run. I don't think she's your atypical sort of American 2-year-old speedball that we see from the Wesley Ward yard. And when you look at her pedigree, she's by Mendelssohn, she should actually get a little bit of a trip. Now, the interesting thing for mine is Wesley actually had the blinkers on the first time out. He's taking the blinkers off for Royal Ascot, which is very unlike Wesley. And he has come out and said they intend on riding her off the pace. Now, when he says off the pace, whether he means sort of in 4th or 5th spot or out the back somewhere, I don't know. But I don't think she's going to do what a lot of the Wesley 2-year-old youngsters do and sort of bang out and, try to make call. And I think you can get good double figures at the moment. I think 16-1 at least, probably a little bit bigger. I think she just looks a little bit better equipped to deal with Ascot, and especially that uphill run, than a lot of the American juveniles. And I think she'll run a bit of a race.
I'm liking this. It's hard not to be very impressed with Little Big Bear's brother, Whistle Jacket. And if you listen to how Aidan O'Brien was talking about him on the podcast and elsewhere, you'd almost think he could be better than Little Big Bear, which, considering he's one of Aidan O'Brien's best ever 2-year-olds and a runaway winner of the Phoenix Stakes, that's quite an endorsement. But he's 6-4. You're not.
Well, he takes a big chunk of the market. He may well come out and win. He's obviously the best 2-year-old probably on either side of the Irish Sea at the moment. But you've got a massive field here at the moment. If it holds up, which it most likely will, I think it is the sort of race that kind of lends itself for most people anyway to looking away from the favourite and maybe finding one at a little bit of value. And if you hunt around, a lot of the firms are going to be paying 1, 2, 3, 4, and maybe even 5 in this race. I think last time I had a look, there was about 29 odd runners or something.
Yeah, it's a big field. It's a big field so far. And not the easiest of ones to decipher. I would be very interested in Celtic Chieftain for the Windsor Castle, by the way. The more I look at him, the more you're going to win that. But very intrigued by Wesley Ward horse. Can he get back into the winner's enclosure with a reduced team this year? Tim Carroll thinks so. To our 5th and final bet from Tim Carroll for Royal Ascot 2024, and to the feature race on the Friday where the fillies take centre stage. Opera Singer heads the betting with Geoff Banks Bet. She's now a 6-4 shot in the absence of Fallen Angel, who came out of the race as we're recording on Saturday. The 1,000 guineas winner El Malka now down to 7-2, and Ramatuelle, who Oisin Murphy will be on board, a 5-1 shot. You are taking on an Oisin Murphy ridden filly on day one, but I think you're with Oisin on Friday.
Yeah, and it's good to see Oisin Murphy aboard for Ramatuelle. I wasn't overly impressed with the ride she was given in the 1,000 guineas. I thought that was a heck of a performance. They went a right old gallop. When I say right old gallop, they went a strong enough gallop in that race. And when you look at the finish, the first 7 across the line all came from the second half of the field. In fact, the 1 and 2 came from the very back. And Ramatuelle was the exception to that rule. Now, she set up on the pace, and for a a good period. She was actually out on the wing a little bit as well without cover. And then the rider went about 400 metres out. And anyone who knows the layout knows that you're pushing if you're up on the pace, especially a good solid gallop, you're pushing the button too soon. And I reckon, and let's not forget she was gambled on the day as well. I reckon if he had sat even for another 50 yards, I reckon she would have won that race. And I kind of think, again, you know, especially now with Fallen Angel out, and you've got Opera Singer, who's, I think, around about 13-8 favourite for the race. The last time I had a look, my selection, she was around about 11-2. And again, maybe for the each-way players, I'm not an each-way player. I like it here. But there's a lot of people who like to have a few quid each way. I just think she could represent a bit of value. The query has to be the fact she's going around the bend, because she's only been around the bend once in her entire career, and that was as a 2-year-old over 6 furlongs when she ran second. But I can't see that being a problem. This race obviously will be run very differently to the Guineas, and I think with a slightly, she'll be up on the pace, you know, there's no doubt about that. But I just think with a rider showing a little bit more patience and maybe not quite as trigger happy, I think she could give this a right old shake.
She should have won the 1,000 guineas. And if he just waited just that little bit, I couldn't agree with you more. Just wait that little bit longer, son. Don't send her too quickly. Oh, God, it's screwed. I am with Opera Singer. I think the other Justify is going to be primed to run the race of her life, because Royal Ascot's a massive advertising board for Coolmore, so I think she will be the one to take all the beating. But I'm genuinely afraid of Oisin Murphy here. I think she's a major player, and I respect her even more now that Tim Carroll has put his confidence behind her as well. Of all the horses and all the bets that we've talked about for Royal Ascot, Tim, which one are you most confident about?
Oh, notable speech. I really like him. I'm going to be disappointed if he doesn't win. I know, look, yeah, he's 13-8 or whatever price he is. I can't help that. I think he's a superstar in the making. I think he's going to be a seriously good horse, one we're really going to enjoy as the summer unfolds. So notable speech in the St James's Palace would be my idea for the meeting.
Damn, if he does go and win that, he is going to be a proper superstar. That'll be a magic performance, and it's a fantastic race to look forward to too. Are you going to be at Royal Ascot, or are you going to be on Sky for the week?
No, I'm actually in the studio this week, unfortunately. I made it out there last year. I did some work for the Australians. I love going. Everyone knows, although I don't say this too loudly because it is in England, but it's my favourite race meeting in the world, so I do like going. But unfortunately...
Cheltenham fans are losing their minds. How dare you!
Yeah, look, I'm not going to be able to make it out there this year, which is a bit of a shame, but I have been booked for a gig next year, so looking forward to getting back.
Excellent. And you are an international man of mystery, because every time I see you on social media, it's either you've put up yet another winner on the At The Races website, or you're in some foreign country enjoying a nice Guinness.
Yeah, well, you know, you do make a good ale in that neck of the woods over there. In fact, I've always said I might be Irish at heart, because you some wonderful music, some wonderful racing, some wonderful racehorses, and yeah, I think it's well known. I don't mind a drop of Guinness too.
Well, Tim, when Asafora wins and you end up being banished from Australia and completely disowned by the Aussies, don't worry, we will welcome you. We will have you as an honorary Irishman going forward. You can just claim the tricolour now.
Yeah, well, I'll go over there, and the first pint I'll order, I'll put it in my Winx holder, and then I'll kick it straight out of the country, I reckon.
Old Winxy! Old Winxy!
Old Winxy!
I would have loved, like, if they had just sent her anywhere international. Doesn't even have to be Royal Ascot. Just take her to Dubai. Take her to the World Cup night. Just go somewhere international with her.
I would have loved to have seen it. The problem you've got is that, I've said this many times, that the Cox Plate for people in the Southern Hemisphere, that's our arc. And when it became apparent that she could win 4, and no horse had won more than 3 at the Great Kingston Town, I think once she won the second one, if she hadn't got beaten in the second one, I've got no doubt she would have come over. But yeah, look, it wasn't to be, and I would have loved to have seen her over here, because she always ran her best in high-pressure races, which you normally get in Europe, and she loved a bit of digging the ground as well. So I think she would have been suited. But I was kind of saying to you off air, and I do mean this, that the strength of Winx was her versatility. Now, she's not going to beat Frankel over a mile. She's, you know, I don't think she beat Sea the Stars over 10 furlongs. And even if I did, I wouldn't be game enough to say that over here, because I'd be hung straight away. But if you have a look at this year's fields, and when I was poring over the form, I was kind of thinking, the funny thing is, if you were a bookmaker, and you ask any bookmaker, Geoff Banks or anyone else for that matter, if you were pricing up the Queen Elizabeth over 6 furlongs this year's edition, the Queen Anne this year's edition, or the Prince of Wales this year's edition, I promise you she's at the top of the market in all three.
Yeah.
I priced up the markets, and she would be at the top of the market in all three.
See,
that was her strength.
When you said that to me off air, I didn't go, you've lost your mind. I agreed with you, and I'm agreeing with you now as well. And I don't know, maybe I'm mellowing in my old age, but I'm looking around at this year's Royal Ascot, with the exception of Notable Speech, who could be a superstar if he goes and wins, and Kyprios, who, assuming he wins the Gold Cup, is a proper superstar stayer. Where are the other superstars? Like, Auguste Rodin is a exceptionally talented racehorse when he turns up. And I don't know if he's... Yeah. I think he'll turn up, but I'm not banking on that, though, Tim. And I wouldn't... he's not in a banker accumulator. He'll be in a lucky 15. Because that then becomes a patent if he gets beaten. You can't... There's not really that many horses that you could really hang your hat on this week at Royal Ascot and go, that's an absolute superstar right there. And that's just not like the meeting in years gone by.
Swings and roundabouts, though. Notable Speech could turn out to be anything. We've got a horse that looked like an absolute wreck after the Guineas, just come out in the Derby in pretty impressive fashion, City of Troy. And anyone that listens to Aidan O'Brien talk, and I know Aidan talks them up a little bit, but you can tell that he genuinely really likes this colt. Yeah. And I thought the way Travelling picked up in the Derby was pretty impressive. So I think he's in for a good year. But you have those years where we seem to have 4 or 5 superstars, and then you have a year or two where you're kind of struggling to find that horse that's going to be a 130-plus rated horse, an absolute superstar. But they come along, We had Frankel, we had Enable, we had See the Stars, we had Flightline in America, we had Winx down in Australia. The Japanese are throwing out a champion every other year. Equinox last year. It's, you got to remember to find horses of that caliber, you're talking 1 in a million, literally 1 in a million. These are exceptional horses. And I've kind of got the feeling, and we'll revisit this pod in 6-7 months' time. I kind of get the feeling Notable Speech is going to be right up there come the end of the season.
Well, with City of Troy and potentially Notable Speech, they're 2 properly exciting racehorses that could end up being absolute superstars. But off the top of my head, Frankel beat Acceleration in the Queen Anne, and Acceleration was a superstar. If you think about it, he beat Ceres des Angles, or whatever the pronunciation is for that horse. There was more depth. There just doesn't seem to be depth now.
Yeah, but you can argue that here. If City of Troy, if he drops back, well, he's going around the Coral Eclipse. Aidan has said he's perfectly fine with 10 furlongs. I would imagine Notable Speech is going to step up to 10 soon enough as well. The way he won the Guineas, I've got no doubt he'll run 10 furlongs. At some point, you've got to think that pair are going to meet. So, there's plenty to look forward to. And, the 2-year-olds, it's very early on in the season. Who knows where they'll end up. And I suppose, with the fillies, it's a little bit difficult to say. But again, the St. James's Palace, we've got the winner of the French Guineas, we've got the winner of the Irish Guineas, we've got the winner of the English Guineas, and all 3 of them look very, very good colts. And I suppose, potentially, the Henry Longfellow could knock the 3 out as well.
Yeah.
He was a big high horse as a 2-year-old. So I think we've got plenty to look forward to.
Do you know what the great thing about this show is, Tim? I'm prepared to admit when I'm wrong, and I'm prepared to also flip-flop. So I've done a complete about turn. You've talked me around. It's a brilliant Royal Ascot. There's incredible talent, strength and depth, left, right, and centre. Total flip-flop from literally less than 3 minutes ago to being, it's an amazing Royal Ascot. Tim, I really appreciate it.
No such thing as a bad Royal Ascot. There really isn't.
I really appreciate your time and your insight today, my friend. Best of luck for Royal Ascot 2024. If you have a good Royal Ascot, we're having a good Royal Ascot. And please God, we'll talk to you again very, very soon. Thanks very much, Emmet. And thank you for watching. If you liked this, and listening for that matter as well, most of you are listening. But if you liked this episode and you liked the insight from Tim, hit the like button. Hit the like button right now. And if you're listening to this on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, go onto YouTube and hit the like button there too. From Tim Carroll and myself, Emmet Kennedy, have a great week. Enjoy Royal Ascot. We'll talk to you again very, very soon on the Final Furlong Podcast. Look after yourself and each other. God bless. The Final Furlong Podcast is proudly brought to you by Geoff Banks Bet. Join the excitement and sign up to Geoff Banks Online now to get 10% off any net losses returned as cash after your first month of betting up to £500 at geoffbanks.bet.